Can I kick this off with a question? It was raised earlier that there was no excuse for politicians not understanding what they're trying to legislate about. But I was kind of thinking about that and wondering if maybe a politician that knows exactly what he's legislating about might be an even scarier prospect. So, would you rather have Zuckerberg or Trump?
I think like our one saving grace is that the existing politicians are just stupid enough to lose it for themselves. So I'd rather have Trump than Zuckerberg.
If you had someone who knew what they were talking about, we wouldn't be having this discussion at all. Like if politicians listened to technologists, if they asked for technologists' opinion and genuinely listened, I don't think we'd be having this discussion. We could talk about other things.
It's a pretty tough question. Actually, I can't answer it. I have a little bit really the opinion I'm very tool oriented, very maths oriented, and I just think that no matter who, Zuckerberg or Trump, the war on maths is just, I trust the maths. It's and I trust the long term. Like I have a more optimistic outlook maybe than most people. I just think the war on encryption is lost for those politicians as it is for Zuckerberg.
I can't bring myself to answer Trump, so I will say Zuckerberg, but I say that with a lot of difficulty, and I agree with everything that's been said.
I'd say neither. I don't think it's necessarily that they need to understand technology to any great extent, but they can't just flippantly say, I don't understand it and I'm unwilling to listen to anyone who does, which is what's going on at the moment. So yeah, but I wouldn't pick either of those two, that's for sure.
It's a crappy choice, isn't it? No, my thoughts on that are, if you're going to force me to choose A or B, I'll choose Trump, only because he's more useful in provoking a backlash. Quite seriously, he's a good organizing platform. And I know a lot of people are getting hurt, and I'm a white guy on the other side of the world who is not his target market for people to hurt, but a lot of people are suffering under that regime. If we don't make good use of the fact that Empire has its mask off at the moment and campaign, you're just going to get you'll get a Zuckerberg or you'll get a Clinton, quite frankly, who will keep up with the drone strikes and the attacks on encryption, but they will present much more reasonably. In the Australian context, and somebody's posted an article on this today, and I forget who it was, so I can't attribute it, but it's a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but only just, that what we're relying on at the moment is the massive technical incompetence of the Australian government to save us. Like, these people couldn't even organise a census, so how the hell are they going to orchestrate, like some of the really complex kind of things that they're taking on in this war on mathematics? And that's a terrible thing to have to fall back on. Like, we're hoping for the kind of basic incompetence behind the people that brought us the butchered NBN and census fail and robo-debt and all this other stuff. That doesn't give us a great deal of comfort, right? So I was going to try and finish off on a positive note, but it's...
I think Turnbull does know something about what he's talking about, which is kind of concerning that he is kind of mounting this war on maths, because, I mean, certainly before he became Prime Minister, he was known as being the more kind of tech-savvy person in the Liberal Party, and also the more kind of actually liberal person in the Liberal Party, and he's turned out to be neither, so I think that's very disappointing.
Just following on from that, so I think there's this concept in a civil society that an educated population is required in order to advocate for themselves, and there's a sense in which our education processes are supposed to build citizens with the capacity to make informed decisions about what they want to defend. And it strikes me that in these conversations, the degree of both technical knowledge and also knowledge about these abstract principles about privacy, which have up until now, I guess, not had such a direct assault in everyone's day-to-day life, potentially. I don't know, because I'm trying to think of the physical equivalences of like trying to lock one's house in the physical world, and traditional fences and traditional property rights and the sorts of ways that people have tried to defend their own privacy and the curtains in their houses, and that's protected criminals in their speed making as much as it's protected people having a private moment in the bathroom. So I just interested in the panel's thoughts from an education perspective is what could we do in education to try and improve the citizens' capacity to advocate for the sorts of rights that they perhaps are due?
I don't know if we actually need to go through everyone because we'll be here forever. But given that I've got the microphone, I'll just talk. I think that there is increasingly acknowledgement that digital literacy is very important. So kind of media literacy has been a term for a long time. I think digital literacy is now kind of a lot of importance now kind of attached to that. Some of that is about sort of fake news, which is a concept that I find quite difficult in some respects. I think some things that are called fake news are not very fake, and some traditional media outlets actually have peddled fake news for a long time. But anyway, I mean, that aside, yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot more that can be done to kind of educate individuals their rights. But if I'm being cynical, that's not necessarily in the interests of government or large corporations either. Anyone else? Okay.
Thank you all. Firstly, that was awesome from every one of you. My question is about a split standard between the expectations of society and government of society. If we take Brandis's diary as an example, do you think there's a disconnect between what government expects of society and what society expects of government?
I like how all these questions would have just made great statements. That's both of those last two, just excellent propositions. Yeah, I kind of fall back on this. Like I'm probably going to mangle it in translation, but the kind of old cypherpunk motto of transparency for the powerful and privacy for everybody else. And what we're seeing at the moment, I think, is just a complete inversion of that. Is that a lot of the decisions that are being made, I don't know who it is, and apologies if you're in the room, but Crikey ran a piece yesterday on the person who FOI'd the government's, like what it was that they actually took to that Five Eyes meeting in Ottawa in June. Like, what is it that they want? What are they trying to actually persuade the tech companies to crack encryption, or are they trying to be able to own individual devices on a more pervasive basis, or what is it that they're asking for? And we discovered this right across the board with data retention and with all these other things, is that the state, the kind of, calling it deep state, I know makes me sound a little bit InfoWars, but the infrastructure, the people who are trying to advance these things are doing so under a shroud of completely opaque. And a lot of our mechanisms, whether it be FOI or other ways, or even whistleblowing protections for finding out what's going on, have been quite systematically targeted and disabled. So you can't find this stuff out in a budget estimates committee or any of these other mechanisms. And yet we're expected to submit to total transparency of a way that you wouldn't even have dreamed of. Somebody around mapping all of your social contact every single moment of the day is insane. So we've stumbled into a world where we've completely inverted that motto, and I think that's kind of a nice one. I haven't seen it formulated better. We need to hold on to that and push back as hard as we can.
My question's for Scott. Sorry. But I was particularly hoping for an insider's perspective on our ability to influence backbenchers and parliamentarians that are not the ministers, essentially. So many of us were heartened with the report of the Joint Committee on Human Rights, for example. And there's clearly parliamentarians that get these issues about data retention and other infringements on human rights. And of course, those recommendations were completely overruled by the Joint Committee on Intelligence and Security. And so I'm wondering about our tactics and our ability to influence backbenchers and other committees, and sort of, an insider's perspective on the hierarchy of those decision-making within Parliament.
Yeah, don't do that.
Thank you. Yeah, this is kind of a second order answer. Well, but it's good that you asked that, because there's something I forgot to say on the way through, that and I fall into this trap as well. We're talking about whether we have an internet filtering regime or data retention regime, or whether they're going to attack crypto as kind of binary. Did they win or did they lose? Did we win or did we lose? And we know these things aren't binary, and I should kind of check my language a little bit more, is that they throw these really quite terrifying ambit claims out there because they know there's going to be backlash, and then they walk it back. Connery wanted deep packet inspection on his internet filter. He didn't get it. In fact, he didn't get much of anything. The original data retention scheme, there were people pushing for web browsing histories. And the strength of the resistance means that they're going to walk it back. And maybe they walk it back all the way to, okay, we've abandoned it, we're not doing it. But it's that kind of gradation. It's not black and white. They'll push for this, and depending on how hard the counterpunch is, they end up settling for something. And there are a lot of people in good heart. You've got the Greens as a block. You've got folk like Lionhelm, who's fucking nuts on something like guns, but actually quite good on some of this stuff as well. And you've got allies inside the Labor Party and inside the Tories as well. There are people slipping me under the door, actually literally on one occasion, from cabinet meetings and deliberations on data retention. People who really disagreed with what their own side was saying. And the academic work the technical community does arms those people internally for debates that we never get to hear. But it does matter. So I'm not going to name names. I mean, you folk all have relationships with people inside that building or in state parliaments or whatever. As long as you know there are allies in there, and the kind of stuff that civil society organisations or industry groups can do to arm those people to win internal fights, even though we only kind of find out in lateral ways as to whether they were successful or not. So I kind of neglected to say that on the way through, you don't always know the wins that you've had. It's a question for somebody. Hey, I've got a question. LastPass, you didn't mention that. Is that bad?
It's somehow didn't make it into our recommendations, but I can't say whether it's bad or not right now. Sorry. Is it open source?
Yeah, no, it's not. But
They had a security incident recently, but I don't know how bad it was. So yeah, but I can look it up for you if you want to know. Not now.
I have a follow-on question to what Scott was just saying about how often politicians roll out these massive schemas of massive. We expect that they're going to roll them back, right? So we essentially invest a whole lot of effort in fighting against something that they never really expected to get through, and so we fall back to something that is still pretty bad. I suspect that that's what's happening here. I suspect that they can't seriously believe that they can implement across all jurisdictions around the world this system of hobbling encryption. But I wonder if anyone on the panel or elsewhere in the room has any thoughts on what they're really trying to achieve.
I think the government itself doesn't necessarily know. Some of the law enforcement agencies would. I think ultimately what they're expecting to get out of it is an easier way to get access to endpoints, so end devices, your phone. Now, certain enforcement agencies have access to that already anyway. If they need to, they can remotely access people's phones. It's under, I think they'd have to do it under warrant. I don't know the details of it, but by doing this, it's making it available, I guess, to state police and other enforcement agencies. But ultimately, yeah, I don't know what they're after.
So ASIO needs a warrant technically to get to do the real-time surveillance at the end of the communication of the actual device. I know for certain that, I can't remember if it was Mark Phelan, the acting AFP commissioner, or George Brandis, one of them said that when they were arguing the case for the encryption backdoors the very first time they announced it publicly, they said that they wanted to extend the ASIO powers to the AFP. So I think you're on the money there.
in preparation for today's panel, I went off and saw the new sequel for Blade Runner, and I won't give away any spoilers, but amongst other things, it's really interested in the convergence of various different technologies, you know, IT and biotech and drones and kind of convergence. I was just listening to the talks tonight. I was kind of reminded of Kirby and Natasha Stott-Despoja, who are very interested not only in relation to personal privacy and IT privacy, but were also very heavy campaigners in relation to health privacy and generic privacy. So maybe a question for Angela. Could you talk a little bit more about that side of things as well? Because I think that is another important element or dimension to some of the debates going on in relation to privacy.
All right, I guess I'll answer that kind of quickly. Yeah, I think with kind of convergent technologies, and in some ways with Internet of Things, we kind of have this sort of super convergence as well, because in my previous life, I worked in telecoms regulation, and then convergence was telecoms and media. Now it's kind of telecoms and the internet and just about everything. So while I think particularly from a legal perspective, there have been sort of different sorts of laws and regimes around kind of health more generally and health privacy. Now that kind of data is also being sort of slurped up along with everything else. And again, I mean, particularly sensitive data, of course, lots of issues around health, even more sort of sensitive data in the context of like data breaches if it's health data that's being compromised. So definitely a big issue, and certainly, I mean, but that's more I think to do with the kind of super convergence of technologies at the moment. So ICTs with kind of everything else. But yeah, even more scary.
And we might take one more question. There we go.
Thanks, everyone. It's been really exciting to listen to all the presentations. In my day job, I go kind of in and out of a lot of different committees, and in Brisbane, like incubator spaces, accelerator spaces, some of the kinds of groups across Brisbane that are actually quite pro-LNP and pro-neoliberal and jobs and growth and so forth. And I would actually posit that a number of them are also very pro-encryption. And together with seeing a couple of more right-leaning media articles and again, pro-LNP media coverage that also says the government should stay out of the whole encryption watering down. And I think the key point is that they're really interested in blockchain. And I was waiting to hear, you know, comments about blockchain. They don't care about privacy. They don't care about any of the, you know, social, ethical kind of stuff that we've been discussing for the last 3 hours. But they care about their dreams of fintech startups, and that requires encryption. So do you reckon that that might be a way to convince Martin Turnbull and the rest of his ugly bunch to pay attention to encryption?
Eru.
Oh, could I take this? Because I was thinking of adding that to the slides too, but it's quite a lot to get across, like explaining all blockchain and why it's so great and everything. But yeah, blockchain absolutely depends on the first principle of blockchain is like having private and secure communication from person to person without a third party interfering. Like that's what it's all about. So if we say like that's not, you can't do that for chat, why would you be able to do that for blockchain or fintech or any of this stuff?
There's a protection of public revenue issue there, though, for transactions, and don't stand in the way of revenue raisers on privacy or data security, because they win every time. So I suspect blockchain at some level is going to be under an international scrutiny. You've seen internationally right now, people are chasing the dollar because they want to collect tax where it's, you know, earned. I don't think blockchain's going to get away from that, and it won't be a privacy issue. It'll be a collection of revenue issue. And frankly, I think the world's best, one of the best, the one that does authentication of diamonds or blood diamonds is from here and moved overseas to gain capital. But you know, I do think there's great potential, but I don't know that it'll be used for privacy enhancing. It'll be more transactional. It actually could be used for collection of personal data and more personal control of data. I think there's some really interesting concepts there about you controlling your own data and providing access to it and authenticating. But I don't know that those tools would be the first ones offered.
The question is, Martin Turnbull only listens to people
there's people in his own church that are saying encryption is necessary for economic growth.
I really like that thought because it goes into a direction that I'm thinking too. It's like reframing this question of freedom against security in a way so that conservatives can agree, and to make it a bipartisan agreement. And that goes into the direction of Michael's thoughts actually in his talks, and where I think that you have to reframe the question in a form of how you see national security. If you start to see it, because if it is about national security, you said that then it becomes a bipartisan issue. If you see national security as the sum of the security of every citizen, then the attack on encryption becomes an attack on national security. And that's exactly I think exactly those thoughts also then, that this attack on encryption also becomes an attack on business and on national security and all those conservative values. I think that's a way to win the discussion. That's also why I liked your talk pretty much. Yeah.
Thank you all for coming. I'm sure the speakers will be hanging around for a few more minutes. On the behalf of ThoughtWorks, help yourself to the remaining beers and have a great night. Thank you.